Now we have finished last time Swamiji's role in the Parliament of Religions. But when I say finished, it was not still finished because an important thing was missing in that description. Some of it is we have a glimpse in the complete works of Swami Vivekananda, but that does not give the complete picture. Swami Yogeshananda, a veteran monk of ours, of American origin, he discovered in the first part of 80s something about this, the whole thing. I am alluding to the small script which you find in complete works, Religion, Not the Crying Need of India. There is something to be told about this. What happened? It was the 10th day, so it is 10th day means 20th of September, 1893. And there was one Mr. Hidland who spoke on religion in Peking. During that talk, he said something which was, somewhat irritating to Swami Vivekananda, but he sat quiet because he was not the scheduled speaker that day. And when he finished, the chairman of the meeting announced that many of the speakers were scheduled that evening, they were absent. So then the audience found Swami Vivekananda among the audience, there among the people in the platform. So they requested him to speak. So it was a totally unrehearsed extempore speech. And what he said is really very startling in the sense that is the first time he was openly talking about some things which will not be pleasant to the Orthodox Christians. Orthodox, I mean, not in the sense of the Orthodox Christianity, but those who are fundamentalists, those who are evangelists, etc. So he said, you see, he agreed to speak and he came forward. And here is what is the research product of Yogeshananda. I want to share with you. Christian brethren of America, you are so fond of sending out missionaries to save the souls of heathens. I ask you what you have done and you are doing to save their bodies from starvation. In India, there are 300 million men and women living on an average of a little more than 50 cents a month. I have seen them living for years upon wildflowers. It is the wildflowers, I think he was alluding to mahua. Whenever there was a little famine, hundreds of thousands died of starvation. Christian missionaries come and offer life, but only on the condition that the Hindus become Christians, abandoning the faith of their fathers and forefathers. Is it right? There are hundreds of asylums, but if the Mohammedans or the Hindus go there, they would be kicked out. There are thousands of asylums erected by Hindus where anybody would be received. There are hundreds of churches that have been erected with the assistance of the Hindus, but no Hindu temples for which a Christian has given a penny. Brethren of America, the crying evil of the East is not religion. We have more than religion enough. What they want is bread, but they are given a stone. It is an insult to a suffering man dying of hunger to preach to him metaphysics. Therefore, if we wish to illustrate the meaning of brotherhood, treat the Hindus more kindly, even though he be a Hindu and is faithful to his religion. Send missionaries to them to teach them how better to earn a piece of bread and not to teach them metaphysical nonsense. Then he wanted to be excused because he said he was not in good health. And then, but the audience was, you see, adamant. They wanted him to speak. So he continued. The paper just read, that means this religion in Peking, says something about the miserable and ignorant priest. The same may be said of India. I am one of those monks who have been described as beggarly. That is the pride of my life. I am proud in that sense to be Christ-like. I eat what I have today and think not of tomorrow. Behold, he quotes from the sayings of Christ, behold the lilies of the field, they toil not, neither do they spin. End quote. The Hindu carries out that literally. Many gentlemen present in the Chicago, this is a report, sitting on this platform can testify that for the last 12 years, I never knew whence my next meal was coming. You see, so he's talking about this, you see, because you must remember that at Swamiji's time, though the total population, you say, in the total population, Christian population of America, there was significant rise of Americans because of the immigrants from the South. But the influential people were all Protestants. You see, even during the election of Kennedy in 1960, one of the charges of the opponents against him was that he was a Catholic. So it is a situation like in Geneva. Today the Catholics are more in number, but they do not have the leverage of power here. It is the Calvinist city, and so it is like that today. So he was, and the Protestants, you see, among others, they have occulted a part of the life of Jesus. They preach the do-goodism, but the Christ, you see, other aspect of Christ, that means loving God intensely and renunciation, etc. This, the Protestants, they have ignored, I say. So it was, you see, he was, this we must remember that he was, and this is the first time perhaps that he was criticizing them, because before criticizing like this, he stepped back and whispered something in the ears of Bishop Keene. And then he came to say that Bishop Keene has assured him that if there is an honest criticism, there will be no difficulty. So this is the beginning of that, you see. And that also will bring much difficulties for Swami Vivekananda. Now, there is a report from Reverend Hawies, the unofficial Anglican delegate, and there is also a report in London Women's Herald of October 26, 1893. They not to be found in any official record of the Parliament. The two reports put together would give a complete view of one of his criticisms made in the Parliament. So what did he say? He said that Vivekananda denounced our commercial prosperity, our bloody wars, our religious inconsistency, declaring that at such a price the mild Hindu would have none of our wanted civilization. So then the recurrent and rhetoric use of the phrase mild Hindu produced a very singular impression upon the audience as the furious monk waved his arms and almost foamed at the mouth. "You come," he cried, "with the Bible in one hand and the conqueror's sword in the other. You, with your religion of yesterday, to us who were taught thousands of years ago by the rishis, precepts as noble and lives as holy as your Christ's. You trample on us and treat us like the dust beneath your feet. You destroy precious life in animals. You are carnivores. You degrade our people with drink. You insult our women. You scorn our religion. In many points, like yours, only better because more humane. And when you wonder why Christianity makes such slow progress in India, I tell you, it is because you are not like your Christ, whom you would honor and reverence. Do you think if you came to our doors like him, meek and lowly, with a message of love, living and working and suffering for the others as he did, we should turn a deaf ear? Oh, no. We should receive him and listen to him as we have done our own inspired rishis. You see? So this is a type of thing which will happen again and again. You see his criticism. So it is a wrong idea that he was only talking of harmony and these things. He used to talk like this also. You see, on one occasion during this parliament, it is not in the complete works. He said, you see, this morning I have heard the creed of Islam being applauded. But I want to remind the audience that the sword of Islam has brought ruin to India. You see, he was like this. You see, wherever he wanted to, you see, he did it like this. Now, it is evident that Swamiji, after the Parliament of Religions, was in Chicago, mainly in the place of Mr. Lyon, who was his host, and also sometimes with the Hells, the first family who received him in Chicago. Now, Swamiji was, apart from preaching and teaching, he was also studying the public work through the organization. You see, how America is doing public work through the organization, which is totally uncommon among the Hindus in India. So he studied many questions relating to school, and there is an account of his going to a school, you see, in the Chicago area. And then the other material, your advancement of civilization, in the hope of bringing some of these ideas to India. So, and in course of this, he met Robert Ingersoll, Robert Greene Ingersoll, who was like this Antony Flew of recent memory, was totally agnostic, but a forceful speaker and honest in his own way. He used to preach what he used to believe. There is a fuller account of his meeting with Ingersoll, and it is, you see, there in one of his memoirs, he himself is talking about it. I am quoting Swamiji. In America, there was a great agnostic, a very noble man, a very good man, a very fine speaker. He lectured on religion, which he said was of no use. Why bother our heads about other words? He employed this simile. We have an orange here. You want to squeeze all the juice out of it. I met him once and said, I agree with you entirely. I have some fruit and I too want to squeeze out the juice. Our difference lies in the choice of the fruit. You want an orange and I prefer a mango. You think it is enough to live here and eat and drink and have a little scientific knowledge. I want to understand the heart of things, the very kernel itself. Your study is the manifestation of life. Mine is the life itself. I must know the heart of this life, its very essence, what it is, not only how it works and what are its manifestations. I want the why of everything. I leave the how to children. So, see, so yeah, in America, there were this, Robert Ingersoll, he was famous agnostic, and this was his reply. And Ingersoll told him that if 50 years ago you would have visited USA and you would have talked as you are talking now, they would have killed you just. So this is another side of what he was doing there. Now, the uh, other things he was doing this time was that uh, this main question of his Indian project. You see. Now we have you know that, you see, in retrospectively we can say that he was not tremendously successful in raising a huge amount of money, but we have some, first of all, it was not his forte, you see, raising money, but we have an idea of his mind through a letter written to Professor Wright, whose recommendations helped him to enter into the Parliament of Religions. I am reading a part of it. He addresses him, Dear Adhyapak-ji, I want to go to work earnestly for my own project, only keeping the project in the background and working like any other lecturer. He who has brought me hither and has not left me yet will not leave me ever I am here. You'll be glad to know that I am doing well and expect to do very well in the way of getting money. Of course, I am too green in the business, but would soon learn my trade. I am very popular in Chicago, so I want to stay here a little more and get money. Then he says that he's going to lecture on Buddhism, etc. How to thank you, my kind friend, or him who brought you to me. For now, I think the success of my project probable, and it is you who have made it so. So this is later. So Swamiji has definitely thought that he will not talk about his project directly, keeping it in the background and move about. Then you see what else he was doing in this time, because it is to Swamiji's, it was more than 2 months. It is something, you see, because he left Chicago around 20th of November. So it is a long time. Now, I have told you that George Hale was Madame George Hale was the first person to invite Swamiji to her home in Chicago. Throughout 1894, Swamiji made her home his headquarters. He had his ideas one day jotted down in pencil in Mr. Hale's later paper. You see, it is interesting how his mind was working. So I am quoting. You see, it is a scribbling on. You see, and I have seen Swamiji scribbling, which was very interesting in Belur Math itself when I was working for the reparation of his room in Belur Math. Now here is, you see, his, that means at visibly idle times, that means he is not lecturing, he is not giving an interview, etc. So his mind was still working. So he's scribbling on a, you see, a piece of paper. You see, you can get the Swamiji's mind thereby. Reason, that means it's telegraphic language, not complete sentences. Reason has its limits, its base. It is degeneration. The walls around it, as agnosticism, atheism, must not stop here. That means the idea is that it is good to doubt, it is good to have agnosticism, atheism, but you must move on. He himself did it, you see. The beyond is acting upon, influencing us every moment. The sky, the stars acting upon us, even those not seen. Therefore must go beyond. Reason alone cannot do. Finite cannot get at the infinite. Faith is degeneration when alone. Bigotry and fanaticism. Sectarianism. Narrowing finite. Cannot get to the infinite. Sometimes gain in intensity, but loses in extensity, as in bigots and fanatics. You see, they worship their own pride and vanity. Is there no other way? There is love. It never degenerates. Peaceful, softening, ever widening. The universe is too small for its expansiveness. We cannot define it. We can only trace it through the development and describe its surroundings. It is at first what the gravitation is to the external world, a tendency to unification. Forms and conventionalities are its death. Worship through forms, methods, services, forms, up to then no love. That means he's talking about, you see, the formal worship. When love grows, you cannot have formal worship. You see. You remember in the sayings of Sri Ramakrishna, one day Sri Ramakrishna came to the main temple, and there he found a very sincere Brahmin devotee. He was doing this ritualistic worship. You see. He stopped there and said that throw away your puja vessels. You see. Name your name Ishana, connotative. You see. What is this? You are still now, you see, doing these things. So that shows the mind of, you see, he taught it. And as we know that Swamiji himself says in the Belur Math Rules, in the chapter on bhakti, none among us will admit that Sri Bhagavan has asked them to start puja, bhoga, etc. We have started it to do honor to Sri Ramakrishna. You see. So that mind is still here, you see. When love comes, method dies. Human language and human forms, God as Father, God as Mother, God as the lover. So then he says, Solomon's song of songs, dependence and independence, love, love. So that means, you see, we have discussed it last time. when we are discussing your, his poem To the Friend, Sakar Prati. He's talking about the same thing here. Love, the chaste wife, Anusua, Sita. You see, these are your not complete sentences. These are, you see, scribblings. Not as hard, dry duty, but as ever-pleasing love, Sita worship, the madness of love, God-intoxicated man, the allegory of Radha, misunderstood, the restriction, more increase, last is the death of love, self is the death of love, individual to general, concrete to abstract, to absolute. Hmm. So these are the things, you see, that means even when he was alone, he was building his message, you see. Building his message means it is not new to him, but he was thinking how to present it, etc., etc. These scribblings give an insight into the workings of his mind. Um, then at this point, we must note that in 1939, Swami Vishwananda, who was in Chicago, received a letter from Sarchandra Chakraborty, who was very close to Swami Vivekananda and his dear disciple. So he wrote in that letter that Swamiji told me that one moonlit night by the lake of the Michigan, you see, his mind was going into this highest samadhi. At that point, he had a vision of Sri Ramakrishna, and he remembered his mission on earth. So slowly and slowly he came back, you see. That means it is the bodhisattva ideal. That means he's ready for entering into nirvana, but for the sake of the world, he's coming back. So you see, he was not an ordinary teacher. His mind was, see, on that point. In April 1894, in a letter to Swami Sivananda, he calls all monks back to the mott to begin work. The letter was shown to Swami Brahmananda and Turiyananda. Turiyananda returned to Calcutta in August of 1894, and Brahmananda came back in November, December. During the latter part of 1895 and the first of 1896, his letters to them were very frequent. Before that, he was not so much writing letters with the brother disciples. And the power of his inspiration and vision are evident in these letters and would revolutionize the concept of sannyasa in India. You remember that we have discussed it during our talk on the Holy Mother, that in 1893, she had a vision in Belur itself, in Nilamba Prabhu's garden house. She was sitting on the bank of the river near the ghat, and it was a moonlit night. And suddenly, Sri Ramakrishna, you see, from behind, he hurried down the steps of the ghat and merged into water. Immediately, Swami Vivekananda sprang up there, and there were hundreds of people there, and he was sprinkling water saying Jaya Ramakrishna, Jaya Ramakrishna. That means the message of Ramakrishna is being carried to the masses by Swami Vivekananda. This is the vision, you see. It is almost the same time. That means Sri Ramakrishna was working through Swami Vivekananda. So therefore, there's an enormous power in that letter. And these letters used to be read out to the Holy Mother also. From 20th November 1893, almost up to the end of 1894, he was tied up with a lecture bureau. The lecture bureau idea came to him because he had seen after the parliament that two delegates from India, one is a Christian delegate, another is the Jain delegate, Mr. Gandhi, they were signing up with lecture bureaus. So he thought that it was a good idea, and he was somewhat trapped by it. When I say trapped means, you see, this bureau exploited him. But he gained in the sense that he had tremendous experience, different platforms, different places. So that was the advantage that he gained in experience. So you see here, I'm showing you, I do not know whether we will be able to see it. Do you see this? I do not know how it will come reverse. Here is Chicago, a little to the north, and with almost 30-degree inclination is your Madison. And then from there, a long distance is Minneapolis. And then down is Des Moines here. And very much down is this Memphis. So these are the towns where he would go now in the winter, the full of winter, and then come to Detroit in January, fourth week of January. Now, it was it was sometimes very hectic, sometimes not so much hectic. For example, the day he started from Chicago to Madison, he did not even stay overnight. After his lecture, he took the night train to Minneapolis. And he was enjoying seeing the cities, etc., and a new country to him, its lakes and its falls, especially in winter. It was very, you see, because in Minneapolis, he saw a whole 50-feet column of fall, you see, frozen into ice because it was tremendous winter. So all these things were new to him, though he had been to the Himalayas, no doubt. You see, it was in Memphis, in all places, you see, that he got somewhat, you see, good reception, because reception in the sense that at least there were some people there who knew his worth, and who could, there are good reporters, because all reporters, when you report, the quality of report will depend upon your religious views, your whether you are liberal or etc., etc. In most cases, there is some difficulty about the reporters, and they used to report negatively about him, I say, admitting his power of oratory, but other things negative, you see. But in Memphis, we find that very, you see, reasonable reporters, and who have insight. So in that way, and much is not known about this period. These 5 cities which I have mentioned, in Madison, Minneapolis, Des Moines, and Memphis, and including Chicago. There are many others, but the full account is not known because there is no stenographer with him at that time, you see. everything is not known during this period. That means immediately in the few months after the first winter, you see. But what is known much is his entry into Detroit, you see. And there, one Mrs. Bagley, who was a very influential woman of the city, she gave her a big welcome and invited all the influential people of the city to her, almost it was a palace. And that was a great victory for Swamiji, because he could explain his ideas to these influential people in Detroit, you see. But all through this, you must remember that Swamiji was always in a in a in a very high mood, you see. For example, you say if one has to rush a little to catch a train, he would not do it. He used to say that you are living in time, I live in eternity. So that was his mentor. So he was, first of all, he was a man of God, who was whose mind was eager to be always in a transcendental state, but for the sake of humanity, who was sacrificing himself. You see? So that was his, you must not remember. Yogeshananda, who has done much research, he has written something in the Atlanta Center's website. I cannot agree with everything of that, you see, regarding his purpose, why he chose America. We must not remember, must not forget that on a piece of paper long ago, Sri Ramakrishna himself wrote these words, and this paper is still in existence. He wrote, Narain Shikkhe dibe. I am telling in Bengali and translating it. Ekhon dure rahibe hag dibe. Yai radhe premamai. Now, what he's saying, that Narain will teach humanity. When he will be far away from the country, he will give a clarion call. So, you see, it is, that means it was destined. He was selected by God, you see. Narain himself saw this paper, and at that time he said that I am not going to do anything like this. Sri Ramakrishna replied that you will have to do it. That means you will be forced by circumstances to do it, you see. So all his, this connection with, especially that Brahmin from Sri Vaishnava, from Chikmagalur, whom we met in Madras, you see, that is, you see, and he goaded him to go to the Parliament of Religions. Then he planned to go it and was waiting for divine guidance regarding this, because he was not sure whether it is his plan or God's will. So when he was certain that it was God's will, he undertook this. So he must remember that there is something divine play behind this, you see, that he would go to America. America, though much of America was prejudiced, much of America had this Protestant bias against monasticism, and also the Catholics had their bias regarding, say, the correctness of non-Christian religions, say, because even after the You know what is Vatican II. Vatican II, you know what is Vatican II? Any one of you? I do not know. Vatican II was the great convention which was held in the Vatican from 1962 to 1965 for 3 years. Idea was to update the Catholic Church. Now, if you go to their site and see the chapters on this interreligious dialogue, you will see either in 15th or 16th clause, there is this, that Catholics must remember that their church is the obviously only flock of God. There may be light in other religions, but this light is coupled with shade. The full light you get is such words are there. Even the updated, you see, Vatican, you see, thing of Vatican II. They call it Vatican II. So even after this Vatican II, this is lingering. That there may be good points here and there, but you see, there is enough superstition, enough bad things, etc. So that idea was much more in America. So everything in the life of Sri Ramakrishna and Swami Vivekananda, for example, Sri Ramakrishna's meeting with Keshav Chandra Sen, it was prompted by God, because he says that I have seen Keshav Chandra Sen even before meeting him. You see, and he talks about this in the Kathamrita. There is a room full of your people, and they are like, and the Keshav is like a bird with a hump on the head. And so he says that and under the wings of Keshav, this what is, and Keshav is saying that you please listen to him, what he's saying. Then Sri Ramakrishna said that I asked Divine Mother, the mother, they're anglicized people, why talking to them? The mother, Sri Ramakrishna says, the mother replied that in this Kali Yuga it will be like that. So his meeting with Keshav Chandra Sen, who was a person who gave an open call in India in those days that Hinduism has to be reformed and accept Christ as your ideal. That is the way. You see, so you should not struggle against the British domination. British domination has come to us to introduce Christ, etc. So to him, Ramakrishna is sent by the Divine Mother. To America, which is, you see, becoming powerful and very, you see, in every respect, money and science and technology, you see, he has got there already. After this electric light was already in the 80s, it came, you see, early 80s. So then dynamo, it was created by Swami Vivekananda's friend there, Tesla. So all these things are happening in America. You see, they are a puissant new state, you see, affluent, rich, etc. To that country, Swamiji was said by God. There's a deep meaning in this. So you must ponder over that. He was not talking always about religion, one must remember. He was talking about customs of India. He was talking certain times about Persian poetry. He was talking about your comparative religion, you see, showing finally that, you see, his favorite point, that ultimately, whatever may be the path, you have to come to the spirit, That means Chaitanya, this Advaitic principle. You must come to that, you see, whatever. So now many, you see, reports about him, you see, but there are certain reports which are good, you see. So there is this report from this Memphis, you see, where I is saying that he was received. He's saying that Kananda, that is how they call Vivekananda. Kananda has no quarrel with the faith of the people of the Western world, as he calls Americans. While he sees much in their mode of life, their social and religious institutions to disagree with, he does not criticize them unless called upon to do so. This is a reporter is saying. He is here rather to cull from American soil ideas and natural aid that will advance his people. Modest in his demeanor, he is inclined to be diffident until aroused by some query that affects his mission, his religion, or his people. Then he is assertive, but never aggressive. Perhaps there is at times a tinge of irony, felt rather than sin, in his manner when contrasting the manners and customs of his people with those of the West. But being a gentleman by instinct, a scholar by training, a monk by choice, he is always courteous and never impatient. If there has been anything of the irascible in his nature, it would surely have been developed last evening when, for an hour or more, he was subjected to a crossfire of interrogatories that kept him ever on the alert and frequently on the defensive. The conversation was participated in by a number of those who have become interested in the monk and his mission since he arrived in Memphis. Among these being present a representative of the Apple Avalanche. Kananda has said much in behalf of his people, their religion, and much concerning Americans and the doctrines of Christianity. And it was to ascertain something on the ground upon which he bases his claims for the Hindu belief and to settle points and not made clear by his discourses that the monk was induced to discuss certain interesting topics. He is diplomatic to a marked degree. While ever ready to reply to any question pounded him, he is nevertheless capable of amusing those that he does not see fit to enter into conversation in detail in a way that precludes further discussion. He is remarkably well versed upon religious, scientific, metaphysical literature, not only of his own country, but of the world as well, and is capable, by reason of his versatility, of maintaining himself in any position in which circumstances may cast his lot. There is throughout his bearing and conversation a certain childlike simplicity of manner that enlists one's sympathy and convinces one of the sincerity of the man's utterances before he begins to speak. According to Kananda, the spiritual life ought to be developed at any cost. It is the attainment of spiritual rather than material that his religion tends. I am a monk, he said, as he sat in the parlors of La Salette Academy, which is his home while in Memphis, and I am not a priest. When at home, I travel from place to place, teaching the people of the villages and towns through which I pass. I am dependent upon them for my sustenance, as I am not allowed to touch money. You see? So all these things, such kind of reports, sympathetic reports, are very rare because people is not to understand him. Then presently someone asked, if your religion is all that you claim it is, if it is the only true faith, how is it that your people are not more advanced in civilization than they are? Why has it not elevated them among the nations of the world? Now the reply of Swami Vivekananda, because That is not the sphere of any religion, replied the Hindu gravely. My people are the most moral in the world and quite as much as any other race. They are more considerate of their fellow man's rights, even those of dumb animals, but they are not materialists. No religion has ever advanced the thought of or inspiration of a nation or people. In fact, no great achievement has ever been attained in the history of the world that religion has not retarded. Your boasted Christianity has not proven an exception in this respect. Your Darwins, your Mills, your Humes have never received the endorsement of your prelates. Why then criticize my religion on that account? I would not give a fig for a faith that does not tend to elevate man's lot on earth as well as his spiritual condition. And therein I am not prepared to admit the correctness of your statements. This was a challenge. So, and he continued, this man, Christianity has founded colleges, hospitals, raised the degenerate. It has elevated the downcast, helps its followers to live. Swami Vivekananda replies, you are right there to a certain point. He replied, the monk calmly, and yet not. It is shown that these things are directly the result of your Christianity. There are many other causes operating in the West to produce these results. Religious thought should be directed to developing man's spiritual side. Science, art, learning, metaphysical research all have their proper functions in life. But if you seek to blend them, you destroy their individual characteristics until in time you eliminate the spiritual, for instance, from the religious altogether. You Americans worship what? The dollar. In the mad rush for gold, you forget the spiritual until you have become a nation of materialists. So this was his reply, you see. So uh, that means my point is that in such interviews, this is not a lecture, this is an interview by reporters, splashes, and also through sometimes through autographed pictures of him. He was teaching the people because normally with the autographs he used to give a message. The idea is that those who are receiving his photographs would also look at some spiritual spiritually insightful point. So that is it, you see. And next day we shall continue from his your Detroit mission onwards, because Detroit was a big triumphal thing, you see. By the side of Detroit, all these areas were Midwestern cities. His tour was a little gloomy in the sense that it was not so successful, you see, except that certainly here and there he met people whose lives were changed by him.
Pranam Maharaj, thank you for the lecture. I was just wondering, I haven't obviously read much, but just a bit of reading, particularly during his second trip to the West in
Yes.
California. Swamiji every now and then talked about his purpose of life being um, feeding the poor. And you also mentioned in your lecture today when he stood up and said, "You cannot preach hi-fi theory
Yes.
to somebody who's
Who is
starving."
hungry?
Yes. So so I don't know how to frame this, but my question would be, if we ask him again, what would be the primary motive? What was his primary motive then, and what should be our primary motive now? Um, what would
See,
it be?
he himself talks about it in his poem. Uh, in his poem, he said that be bold and face the truth, be one with it. Let vision seize. Or if you cannot, dream of truer dreams, which are eternal love and service feel. Okay. That means if you are, that means the highest goal is to have the experience of oneness. Face the truth, be one with it. Let vision seize. Or if you cannot, dream of truer dreams. You see. But this is, though he said this, you see, he had another role. You see, the role is that of a great Acharya. Gita mentions it. Gita mentions it. Ah, Gita says that the highest, yes, is the highest the spiritually developed person, he behaves like an attached person and does work, humdrum work for the good of the world. Mm, good of the world. This we see in Swami Vivekananda, this we see in Sarada Devi. You see, Sarada Devi was always, she was highly active, always active, yet deeply spiritual. You see. Now, almost, you see, a few weeks before her passing away, she said that let my nieces, she was the virtual mother to them, let my nieces go back to the village. They should not be here. So then Swami Saradananda put this question to him that if they go back, they'll be spat upon by the villagers. That your aunt raised you, now in her last days you have come back. You see, listening to this, Sarada Devi replied, so they should not enter into my room, not their children. I have cut off the cord of Maya, she said. That means for the sake of the, you see, good of the world, she herself kept this Maya so that her mind remains downward, you see, and she was, you see. So Swami Vivekananda was also like that. You see, struggling here. We have this Michigan question. You see, later on this will happen in the cave of Amarnath also. You see, he remembered his mission and you see, restrained himself from merging into the ultimate. But he was a very great soul. He could do it. For others, you see, the goal is, as the Gita says, you must na karmana namnarambha nishkarmang purushasute. Gita says, without going through karma yoga, you cannot have the stage of no action. You cannot have.
Thank you, Maharaj.
Okay.
There is one question.
Yes.
This is from Somjit Bharat from
Yes.
Maryland.
Yeah.
Maharaj, what would be Swamiji's role in the current volatile situation? What role would he play?
A current war-like situation.
Volatile.
I see. Okay.
So what would his role be in that situation we are nowadays?
His role would be to, you see, role of the spiritual teacher. That means if you talk about the COVID question, you see, you look at him, what he did during the Calcutta plague. You see, you look at him, he immediately hurried back to Calcutta from Darjeeling and very quickly had these manifestos, plague manifestos published. And you see, he launched his work among these people, you see. So if you talk about this, if you talk about this, your modern situation means also nowadays big wars are not there, but conflictual situations have exploded. throughout the world. You see, because man has more technology, more know-how to do harm to others. You see. And another thing is that because of this IT, this information technology, instant information is there. So globally, it is not very good in the sense that most happenings are because the participants in this world today, mostly they are not yogis. So most happenings are unfortunate happenings. The manifestations of love, affection, etc., they are there, but the other thing, they say they prevail much more. So IT in general, you say, is having a globally negative effect because of that, in spite of its positive things. We are having this meeting because of IT, you see, for example. So man must be reminded about his spiritual your duties, spiritual. Otherwise, if you go in the other direction, there will be more suffering. So Swamiji would have worked. You see, he said that you should not think that he has stopped working. Himself said that it may be necessary that I find it necessary to cast up my body, but I shall not cease to work till the whole world knows that it is one with God. So how he is doing it, in what way, we do not know. Sometimes God does things through, you see, through circumstances which are totally negative. For example, the United Nations, which by and large has done some good thing, you see, has come out of the two world wars which killed 60 million people in Europe, and enormous suffering in other parts of the world also. But out of the suffering, you see, came this United Nations, as well as the independence of so many countries from colonialism. So all this is a result of the world wars. So God does it. So the present situation, etc., and conflicts, etc., we also have something good in them, in the sense that they'll trigger the opposite thing.
We have one more question.
Yes.
This is from Dayananda Swami. He's asking, Pranam
Dayananda
Maharaj.
Swami.
Yes.
Dayananda.
Yeah.
Yeah, yes.
Pranam Maharaj, will continuous self-sacrifice would lead to meditation?
Yes, because self-sacrifice is the first block in our meditation. What is the, you see, this is all our rajas and tamas, etc. They are in relation to ahankara and mamakara, I-ness and minus. So when you do things for others and sacrifice yourself for that, your time, energy, your comfort, you see, you are curbing this ahankara and mamakara. In that way, your mind is prepared, you see. And I give the example of Swami Vyasananda, whom we have seen, you see, Vyasananda. This Vyasananda in Bulgaria, he was highly active, you see, highly active. I remember around 1985, one day, you see, before my very eyes, he began to retire from work gradually, you see. And he confided to me that the only way of spiritual progress is for him to repeat the name of God as much as possible. That means in whatever circumstances you are, you repeat your mantra. And you see the result, you see, what a fine monk he became. You see. Ah. So for, you see, at least 34 years since then, you see. So that is the example before your very eyes. Just to your question, you see, I understand why you are asking this question. You see, it is really difficult, you see, to see God in man, you see, but that has to be done through our sadhana. That has to be done through our sadhana. And see, the last message of the Holy Mother, you remember, what she said, uh, no one is a stranger, my child, and the whole world belongs to your circle intimate. That was her message. So it is like that. That is our main block to, what should I say, spiritual liberation. We think, you see, in terms of me and ours and the other. So this is, you see, this through sadhana, we must, you see, lessen and lessen and lessen it. You see, that means, in other words, developing true love. Otherwise, do-goodism, it is okay, it is, it brings some good, but it is not giving you much spiritual benefit. So you, when you are in the level of do-goodism, when you begin to serve human beings with the idea that we are serving God, that means, in other words, your the essence of your own nature. See, so then your service becomes sadhana.
So no more questions, Swamiji. So we could go to our next program, to the guided meditation.
For guided meditation, I would suggest that you take the theme of Swamiji's passions, that means his suffering and anxiety in the months following the parliament. That means, what was in his mind, his, you see, he had some success in the parliament, but how to make it a permanent thing, and so that something good and great would come out of it. So he was meeting with people, is in a country which was not totally hostile to him, but most people were not ready to accept him or accept his ideas. You see, only some people was there who were there even before Swamiji's birth, long before. Transcendentalists in Concord appeared in, you see, people like Thoreau lived, you see. So America had something. America had, you see, a little, you see, grain of spirituality, even of Eastern wisdom, something of that was there. But it was not enough to act upon the whole society, and they had not seen before Swamiji a monk. So this, in this situation, his, you see, his mental, you see, dilemma, how to do, what to do, how to proceed, you see. So all these things, you see, that should be the first subject. Our second subject would be his great meditation on the Michigan. And the third question is, the third point of meditation would be that his great idea of employing spirituality. You see, this is a recurrent thing, you see. It happened even while he was journeying from Asia to Vancouver. You see, his fellow traveler was Jamshedji Tata, the great entrepreneur. This man, Jamshedji Tata, around 1898, wrote him a letter that, you see, I'm giving you money. You see, with that, you say, prepare your this spiritual persons who devote themselves to the cultivation of science. You see, that means spiritual energy, cultivation of science and technology to bring development to the country. You see, Swamiji did not accept this because he had other program, this building the mosque. So that will be our third theme of meditation. So let us begin. The first,